Hey guys, welcome to the Primed Fatherhood podcast. I'm your host, Lief Condie, and this is episode 14. This morning, I talked my dad into coming out and going hunting coyotes early in the morning. It was only 5 degrees, but we really enjoy the time that we spend together. We've become really close friends, and I really admire him. He is a civil engineer who worked for the state of Utah for 30 years and has just barely recently retired to go and work in the private sector. And he has also been heavily involved in Boy Scouts, in hunting. He's been a leader in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints for a long time. He's currently a bishop, and he's just an awesome example of humble, quiet strength and knowledge. He is a great teacher, and I'm excited to share with you the interview where we just discussed a lot of the value of doing projects with your family and your kids, as well as some of the tips that he has for how to be a good teacher and leader and how to build relationships so that when you have to make tough corrections, you can do that without burning bridges. We have answered the call. We are committed to a greater purpose. We are fathers. Past achievements do not guarantee future success. We will prime ourselves often to navigate each new challenge. We are capable, brave, and relentless. We will remain undaunted. Well, Dad, I'm really excited to have you on the podcast. And I'm sure I'll have you on more often because we only have time for 1 or 2 stories today. But I wanted to start out by talking about the canoe project that we did together.
Okay.
I think I was 12 or so, around there. I just know that I had read Huckleberry Finn or something like that, and figured that as a 12-year-old, the next best vehicle for adventure next to a bike was a canoe. And so I remember asking for a canoe for Christmas, and for whatever reason, I don't know if you guys hinted towards anything or what, but I thought I was getting a canoe for Christmas. And then when I ran upstairs and saw the Christmas tree, there was no canoe leaning up against the wall, but there was a pile of cedar planks and a little present on top that turned out to be a book. I was pretty deflated at that point, but that turned into a pretty amazing experience of being able to turn those planks into a cedar strip canoe that was a multi-year project for us.
We just couldn't afford a canoe at that point.
But was that the only reason that you decided to do it that way, or what else were you planning to?
Well, mostly was money, and then thought it would be fun to do a project with you, and I'd heard about those cedar plank canoes, and I'm always up for a good project.
Yeah. So the process of building the cedar plank canoe meant that we took those planks and we ripped those into 1-inch by 1/4-inch strips on the table saw, and we had a ton of strips of wood. And then we took plywood and we used a schematic from the book. The book was called Canoe Craft. We used a schematic that gave us dimensions for each different section of the hull of the boat. And so we cut all those different sections, the widths out of plywood, built a workbench, screwed those, what do they call them, forms?
Yeah, they'd be forms, they'd be cross sections about every 1.5 feet or 2 feet on the length. It changes.
Yeah, every single one is different in size and shape in order to make this really curvy canoe shape as they're spread out on the workbench. And then you just staple and glue the strips together around those forms, and it ends up making a hole. The thing that I remember about the whole process was it took us a couple of Saturdays to build the bench and do all the forms and then do all the ripping of the lumber. But then after that, it seemed like we were just working on the canoe at between 5 and 6 in the morning for 20 minutes before school, a few times a week. It doesn't seem like it was every day of the week.
No, it wasn't.
And then maybe like one Saturday a month, like for a couple hours. It wasn't, there were some times where we got some good concentrated effort in, but it was pretty consistent amount of work over 3 years. I think it took us 3 years and 3 months to finish the canoe.
I can't remember.
Yeah. I learned a ton about design and construction and engineering and measuring and math and all of that as part of that project. And I feel like that really helped me to get started on the path that I took through high school and college and into my career. And I feel like I just learned so much from doing that with you. How much of that was you intentional for you trying
I knew it'd be good teaching situations or experiences, but I probably didn't realize how much it was. I know that it's a lot easier to teach how to read a tape measure and with that in mind, how to do fractions in real life situations rather than just trying to do it on a piece of paper to learn it. I think reading a tape measure or even measuring cups, for flour and sugar, making stuff in the kitchen, those two things help people understand fractions probably better than anything else. Helps them understand what they've learned maybe in math or geometry.
Yeah,
fractions.
Definitely. I think that was an awesome experience to learn all of those skills, but I also learned a lot of other really important things from it. I think one was discipline. Yeah. I don't think until that point I knew how often you were up by 5 in the morning, and I definitely didn't know what it felt like to be up that often. And I don't remember how happy I was about it. Was I ever happy to be up?
Oh, sometimes.
That part was hard for me, I remember, but I honestly don't remember how grumpy I would have been or how hard it was for you to pull me out of bed. But that discipline of sticking with something for 3 years is something that I think about now, even the fact that we took on a really big project. It's quite a job to build a canoe that way and to do it over that huge amount of time, but actually finish it. And we did. We finished it. We got it out on the lake. It was way faster than any other canoe that we'd ever been in. And then we put it in like a youth talent show thing that I had for church, and then we put it in the county fair, and we won the sweepstakes awards there. And I learned a lot from that project because it took so long to complete, and it was pretty hard and uncomfortable through it. And by that time, I mean, I was 15. I was thinking about driving, and then we were finishing the canoe. And so it wasn't that instant gratification that I was looking for when I was 12. But I took a lot of pride in the fact that we finished it and that everyone was so impressed with how it looked and how well it worked and all of that. So I really appreciate that part of it.
Yep. It's been quite a while now.
Yeah, it has. I think one of the other things that I learned from that project was just really what it takes to teach those kind of lessons. how, I guess, as you were taking me through it, were you worried about finishing it by a certain amount of time, or what was your approach?
Not really. And as we got closer with getting the wood done, then I got a little bit worried about the epoxy and the fiberglass material that we put over the outside, trying to find the best stuff, how to get it, where to get it, and then how to do it. And that's about the time that I started to learn about the internet, being able to search stuff, just barely starting to, that's when the just barely starting to get, so you could search and find stuff. And we got some good information. Ordered the epoxy. It's a 2-part epoxy, and the fiberglass was a loose bidirectional weave, and it looks white when you put it on and you drape it over like a material. And then as you put the epoxy on it, the epoxy actually soaks right into it and then into the wood below it, and the fiberglass disappears. It looks like it's not there. It looks like it's just part of the finish. The epoxy, it looks like it's been varnished, but it's just epoxied, just glued.
Yeah, that was quite a project to finish off the fiberglass and the epoxy, and then the 100 rounds of sanding that it seemed like it took to get it.
Sanding before that, we had to have it all sanded before we put the epoxy and fiberglass on, and then we did sand lightly on the top of the epoxy. The first epoxy that we did which would be the outside with the canoe upside down, you just drape it over and it hangs down. We started at the top and you squeegee that epoxy on around the form, on around the boards that you've got. But then we had to turn it right side out, from upside down to right side up, and then we had to do epoxy and fiberglass on the inside, and that was a little bit harder because instead of it just dripping off your excess, it just puddled in the bottom. So you had to kind of make sure you kept cleaning that up so you didn't have a thick puddle in the bottom that would make it a lot heavier and start to, take away the efficiency.
Yeah. The crazy thing about the build process for that canoe was there was no ribs inside of it by the time it was done. All of those forms got kicked out sideways, and the tongue and groove, or the bead and cove routing that we did on the strips, combined with the glue and the fiberglass and the epoxy, made it hold its shape. So the canoe, I think, is 17 feet 7 inches long, and it only weighs about 70 pounds.
I think it's less than that. I think it's about 60.
So really, it's quite an impressive project for what it was, and that alone really taught me the power of engineering and planning and using the best construction processes, because I was just blown away at how strong it is and how light it is and how fast it is based on the way that it was made.
Yeah, it's a pretty good work of art. Turned out well.
Yeah. One of the things that I think that you have done really well as a father, and that your dad did also, is just constantly teaching and learning. Is that something that you focus on, or is it something that is more automatic?
I think it's more automatic, but I have tried to cultivate it. I love to learn. I love to learn new things. I like to build stuff with my hands. I like to learn processes and learn everything in the background. I've also built bows and arrows, all from scratch. Learned a ton about wood, and actually also, dynamics, the flight of the arrow, stuff like that. I love to braid, all kinds of different braids, all kinds of different braided knots, and those things have challenged my mind, helping me learn them. But then from my dad, we always wanted to learn more and more about animals, and it probably started with farm animals or deer and elk, hunting them, but it's expanded to all animals. I paid for a lot of my mission by trapping muskrats, and now I really enjoy trapping coyotes and bobcats. You catch a few foxes, but the things you learn about the animals, where they go, what they do, how to find them, is really interesting to me. Watching the deer, the elk, and the sheep, the cows, what do they eat when they're out there on the range? How do they take care of themselves? Where do they go? How they survive? We learn a lot watching and learning from them. And I've always had a deep interest in learning about plants and animals, what plants are best, how your garden grows, how your trees grow, how the trees on the mountain grow. And so these things have always pushed me to learn, and then in that learning, I'm like, I want to teach my kids this. What about this? It does have a drawback. I like to do all kinds of things, hobbies, and then I don't have time to do them all.
Yeah.
And so then I want to go do other stuff, and I got to finish something else I've already started.
As far as that goes, the learning seems to be this innate curiosity that you have for things. I can remember being at the dentist and having you ask the dentist so many questions about the tools and the process and everything, and then the dentist offering for you to try the drilling in my mouth, and that was when I started to squirm and tell you to stop bugging them. But I think that what you do really well is teaching and helping to take the things that you're learning and share those with people in a way that makes them feel like you care about them and how things turn out. So why, how do you do that, I guess?
Well, I've learned that I'm not much of a people person, and I have to work on being a people person. But I've also learned that people are the most important animal, the most important to each of us. So we need to take the time to see how the people are doing. Number one, just ask them, how are they doing? And if they give you an unusual answer, follow that up. Ask them about it. What can you do to help them out? The other thing is, in my position as an engineer, my job was to evaluate and accept or reject people's work on the roads, road work. Everybody's always in a hurry because time is money, but it's hard when you have to tell people to tear out what they've just spent days or weeks doing, hours, lots of effort, lots of money, tear it out and replace it. So I learned to try to appeal to people to do a good job based out of their pride in doing a good job, wanting the job well done. And if you talk to them along the way and you express that you appreciate their work, you appreciate what they're doing, but it needs to meet a certain standard or it needs to accomplish certain things, then you can get people to kind of respond from their inside, from the inside of them, trying to prove to you that they're good workers, they do good work, they have good material, they don't want to redo it ever. And sometimes there is problems and mistakes or a problem with the material, but in the long run, if you can work with the people, let them know what's expected up front, and have an open communication style, then you can give pointers and they will accept those pointers a lot of times, and other times they'll come to you with a dilemma. What about this? We know this, but what about that? Can you work with this? Can we work with that? And these things, I think, help people enjoy their work better and not feel like You're just an overseer or a mean overseer. But that has helped me learn to teach people and try to get people to learn from their own interest, their own desire to do a good job.
So, going along with that, with your role as a state engineer and inspector for construction, you guys weren't actually building the roads. You were inspecting the construction quality as it goes.
Right.
But it's not like you would just show up on the last day
No.
and say, this is good or this is not good.
Right. Right. You're involved with the process, and you, being involved with the process, you can help things work out better.
You can influence and course correct as you go,
Right.
rather than doing it all at once.
Right.
As well as, what's the process of setting expectations up front for?
Well, in my career, we would have a pre-construction conference on every project and talk about the requirements and the schedule and what's expected, both for the products and the scheduling. Schedule is a big thing everywhere. Everybody has time constraints and things need to be done by certain times for certain reasons, and you lay all that out up front and discuss it up front openly. And then the other thing that I learned, working on the roads, we would have a weekly meeting, and we wanted that meeting to be totally open communication. If there's problems, let's hear about it and address them and take care of it. If not, if you didn't have that meeting, it seemed like little things would start to fester, and it gets worse. So I started using that not just at work, but even at home and stuff. Communication is key to everything. Have that communication often, on a consistent basis. And you can discuss things, you can roll with the punches, you can offer insights and help. And in the long run, it tends to help people learn and do and produce and also enjoy it along the way.
Yeah, I saw that a lot growing up, was that you were, it was easier for us to know what your expectations were than I think I recognized at the time. We always knew what you expected, but I also always knew that you guys were around and wanting to talk and wanting to do things together. And I feel like that open communication really helped us to learn as kids to communicate, but also to understand why you guys were setting the standards that you were, rather than it just being a dictatorial kind of thing. So
yeah, if people understand what's expected and why it's expected, then people are more willing to produce, whether it's just the way they live or whether it's products or whether it's a service, all of that.
So then when people aren't meeting expectations, what is your approach to let them know?
Well, you need to let them know. That's hard sometimes. You need to let them know and talk to them about it. And then again, when you're talking to them about that's a good time to explain what's expected and why it's needed that way, and ask to have that improvement made. It's kind of hard, but you pretty much just got to talk about it.
Yeah. Since we live and work in the same community, I've now had a lot of customers that have needed signs or design work or things like that have worked with you. And whenever they find out that I'm your son, they always tell me, oh, he's such a good guy. His job has been really hard, but he was such a great guy to work with. And I feel like one of the
thank you.
things that makes that happen with everyone that I talk to who works with you is that you're taking the time to build relationships and share and teach the whole process through.
Yes.
So then when the hard part of the job comes up and you have to make corrections or you have to do rework, because that's a part of almost every single job,
All right.
then you're not burning bridges when you're making those corrections. You're actually helping them to learn. So what's some of the other things you do to help that?
In all of that, you have to be honest. You have to be honest all the time. If you have fallen down and not responded or not done something that you're supposed to, you've got to accept that and make it right. And you've got to do what you say you'll do. And you've got to, in the reverse, you got to say what you're going to do. And you've got to be totally honest. You expect everybody to be honest with you, and you tell them that. You tell them that we're going to be open and honest and communicate. And we did a lot of partnering workshops and stuff, and that helped me learn stuff like that. I've always known you need to be honest with everything, but the communication and the honesty together, you got to have both. And then when you have those hard things, you still got to just move forward. Same thing, communicating honestly.
Yeah, for sure. I think that another reason that people are able to take correction from you is because it's coming from a more genuine place. It's not you're correcting them because the state says that it has to be better, or you're correcting us as kids because this is the rule and the way it is. It's more, every time that I've seen a correction come from you or heard of it, it's been because you care about how things turn out, and because you're coming at it from the area that, hey, we want to make this the best that we can, and we're not enemies in this. We're up against the situation, and not not you and I facing off. It's you and I together trying to solve this problem. And I think that helps make those tough corrections as well.
You have to be willing to be in their corner as you try to teach and guide and help them, and yet you've got to let them do what they're going to do. Compliment them. When compliments are there, you need to compliment them, and don't just drag people down. Always be positive.
Yeah. I think that another thing that I see in that is just you don't mask your discomfort when you're having to talk about the hard things. It's you allow people to see that it's hurting you or making you as uncomfortable as it is them hearing it. And I think that is genuine from you, and that makes it a lot easier to take those kind of hard challenges. I mean, I know that you guys have had rework that's been in the hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, and so that those are hard corrections to swallow. But
They are. It's hard to do.
Yeah. Another element that's part of teaching and making corrections and guiding people is just your level of involvement in a project. Growing up, I saw that you were always pretty involved what we were doing, but not controlling it.
Tried not to be having my thumb on people, but yet involved.
Yeah. So how do you gauge that? How do you gauge if you're micromanaging versus if you're too disconnected?
That's a hard one. I'm sometimes wonder if I've been too much hands-on, or people feel like I've got my thumbs on them. But to help that not feel as much that way, you need to let them do and produce or accomplish what they're trying to do without you just restraining them or telling them every turn to make, everything to do. You're still involved, you still understand, but you have to let them either accomplish it or fail. And you need to compliment them and rejoice and celebrate their successes. And on the failures, you can point those out, but don't repoint them out and don't keep beating a dead horse. Say it once and be done with it. Move on. Always be happy and excited to move on, but be positive, not negative. And when there is hard things, don't use them as leverage over people, and don't keep reminding them again and again about that other thing that was a problem. You've said it once, move on.
Do you see someone kind of go in the wrong direction and allow them to go that direction in order to let them have a failure in order to learn it?
To a point. If you know that things are wrong and not being done right, you need to say it. You need to tell them up front. But then again, we all learn from our own mistakes a lot more than we do from other people telling us stuff. But you don't want to sit there and say, I told you so. That's hard to take. And sometimes people will realize, yeah, you told me. I wish I would have listened better. But you don't tell them that again and again and again. Try to guide them, try to help them, and rejoice and celebrate their accomplishments. And mention when you have a failure, when that happens, but also use it as a learning experience. Okay, this happened because of this. We're not going to do that again. How can we avoid this again? But then go on.
Yeah. I remember working on the canoe and sanding against the grain pretty badly on one of the more visible parts of it. And I can remember you coming over and showing it, no, you need to sand with the grain so that you're not scratching it this way. And I can remember thinking like, well, why didn't you tell me that first? But being able to sand it out meant that it wasn't that detrimental of a thing. So that I felt like that was looking back at it now, that's a good example.
Maybe I didn't see what you're doing at first. Maybe I didn't realize that. Maybe I didn't realize that you hadn't had sanding experience and hadn't picked up on that yet. I learned the hard way, sanding too much cross grain. And I'll only do it now if you really got to take something down fast, because it's hard to get those cross grain scratches out.
Yeah. Well, what do you think is the single most important thing to remember to do when you're in a teaching and mentoring position with someone?
Take the time to explain what's going on, or the principle, or whatever it is. Take the time to explain it, and then explain why. And as a teacher, you really got to understand it. If you're trying to teach something you don't understand, it's hard. So you've got to have the understanding. You've got to think about how you learned it, and think, did I learn this the hard way, or was the way I learned it, the teacher that taught it to me, good? And if it was good for you, do it the same way. If you learned it a real hard way, take the time to try to explain it differently. Maybe that will help somebody following you. Other times, the other thing is, ask them what they just learned. Have them kind of repeat to you so you can see if they've caught all the points. And if they've missed a point or two, help them with it. But also, as you do that, try not to be condescending. Try to get people to be excited to learn something or do something because it was fun to learn, because it's something they didn't know, or something that they want to do better at.
Yeah, I think that that's something that is definitely undervalued is just the enthusiasm. Because when you're teaching and sharing something that you know, you're quite enthusiastic about it and really showing that you're teaching it out of a place of enjoyment or
And friendship.
and also just a place of trying to share and help rather than teaching because you know more or trying to show that you know more. I think a lot of times when people teach, it comes off that they just know more than you and you need to catch up. And I've never experienced that with you. So
That's hard. You have to be careful that you're not that way. And
Yeah.
some people pick stuff up easier than others. And some people pick up stuff in certain ways easier than others. You kind of have to learn that about, as you're teaching your kids or your family, you got to learn. You learn pretty quickly how some learn, and they're not all the same. And what I would teach to you or to your brother or your sisters, sometimes I have to take a different approach to have the same understanding.
To wrap up, I just want to ask the question, if you were my age and have a really young family again, what would you tell yourself in order to help yourself do better?
That people are important. At the stage you're at, I probably didn't think people were as important. I just soon go do things off alone. You need to take the time to get to know the people and let them see that you care. Take the time to let them see that you care, and that comes with just spending time with them.
Which people?
Like your kids,
or?
like your kids and your wife, your families. Take the time to spend with them. Explain to them what you like to do. Explain to them what you're trying to show them. Too many times we just don't take the time to teach our kids maybe how to dust or maybe how to vacuum. If we take a second and teach them on it first, then it's easier for them. You tell them just go dust. What does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
Take the time to teach them. And if you got to reteach people things, do. But here again, there's a fine line to where, are you just saying it to be heard again? And you can see when people's had enough.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and talk. I want to definitely have you on a few more times to talk through a lot of your mentality for why you like to hunt and learn all the survival skills, as well as to talk more about just all the different leadership lessons that you've learned in your career and everything. So we'll have to do that later.
Well, thank you. Appreciate you.
Yep. All right. Thank you, Dad, for taking the time to do this interview. I know you're always very busy, and I really appreciate it. I hope that everyone was able to hear just some of the little tips and helpful things that he mentioned as far as being able to be a great teacher, as well as understanding a little better on how to make course corrections and how to build relationships along the way and teach along the way, so that when corrections need to be made, they don't burn bridges or cause strain on relationships. I think that this is a great opportunity for us to think, how am I doing at this skill? Am I really involved enough with my family and with those that I'm leading that when it comes time to have the hard conversations, I can confidently go in and say, I know where you're at, I know what you're struggling with, and here's the plan for how to change it. So I hope that this episode helps you guys out. Thank you for listening. As always, if you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with someone who you think would be benefited by it. As well, please take the time to subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating wherever you're listening. And if you want to connect with more like-minded fathers to be able to share your experiences in fatherhood and ask for advice and help, please join the Primed Fatherhood Facebook group, and please follow us on YouTube. Thanks for listening, and stay primed.